Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sprint 205 review. This was a normal 2-week sprint ending on February 6th. Let's get started. I'll start with the overview, Jeffrey on the UI, Adam on providers, Joel will do the platform, and Keenan on the API. This sprint was similar to last sprints in that we had 42 PRs merged this sprint. Again, it's a little light because we're still working on some proof of concept type stuff for replacing Automate or coming up with a better Automate. And similarly, we had 20 enhancements in the closed PRs and 8 bugs. And over to Jeffrey for the UI.
Hey, good morning. So in this PR, in this sprint, 19 PRs got merged in the UI Classic repo, out of which 5 are bugs, 7 are enhancements, and a few others. I can explain about them in the following slides. For this PR, there was an error reported in the dashboard widgets, specifically to the Morphe version. So the error was when we refresh a widget chart, there were some errors in the browser console. And then when we try to zoom in, the spinner will not disappear and the zoom in action is not completed. The reason was the Angular code was trying to add the widget objects again to a registry during the refresh action. So resetting the instances in the dashboard registry after the refresh action actually solved the issue. Next slide. The AutoST team added a conditional async validation to the Cloud Volume forms. Also, the volume name field was disabled while trying to edit the record. Next slide. The AutoST team also added the host initiator groups to the EMS storage dashboard recently, and a few more changes were needed to enable the configuration toolbar button and to redirect to the new action property. Next slide. The refresh button of the physical storage list page was not working as expected. So the AutoST team made few changes to call the refresh of the storage manager that connected to this physical storage. The refresh button will now be enabled only when one physical storage is selected. Next slide. For this PR, there was an issue related to editing the tags. So when you try to add or delete tags from the service summary page, we get an error like cannot access records without an ID from the services list page. So a small method was defined in the application controller to retrieve the ID if selected from the summary page and then navigate to the tags form. And we also handled the add and delete tag feature for multiple services, as this feature was also available in the list page as well. Next slide. The AutoST team had recently added validations to volume and services name, but that caused failure in the backend when duplicate names were used again in the form. So they added a validating function to a separate file so that we can reuse them in other schemas if needed. Now the validator says the name is already exists before the form is even submitted. Next slide. The settings analysis profile summary page was converted from HTML to React. Next slide. The AutoST team added the physical storage column of the volume, which is connected in the storage manager's list page. Next slide. The company category tabs page had an HTML table, which was also converted to React data tables. Next slide. The AutoST team had added a search bar to the volume mapping and host initiators groups list page. Next slide. A shared processor pool fields were added to the add VM provisioning from form by the AutoST team. Next slide. The settings company category form page was converted from HTML to React. Next slide. A few packages are updated, like HTTP cached semantics, which was a dependency of around 6 packages, and Melody had updated them all. And similarly for JSON-Fi, we're importing few older versions of few of the packages, and Melody updated them as well. Next slide. And that's all from UI side. Over to Adam.
Thanks, Jeffrey. So this sprint, the AutoSDE team added refreshing capabilities of physical storage families to their provider plugin. So this allows us to be able to see what types of features a particular type of storage will support, which will be useful going forward. They also made a change to propagate any failures that happen during their EMS refresh workflow, which is the state machine that gets run after an operation is executed, and we want to wait for the refresh to finish. If anything fails during that process, they'll raise the failure up to the parent MIQ task so that you can the user can see it in the task list and be able to see that something failed. For the IBM Cloud Power side, they added the collection of shared processor pools to their provider. This is mapped in ManageIQ as a resource pool, and it is something that a VM is a part of. And so their other side of that is to add it to the VM provision form, so a user can now select which shared processor pool to put a VM into when they're provisioning a VM for Power VS. And for VMware, we fixed a bug with host verify credentials that was introduced as part of some refactoring due to hosts not having the same endpoint support that a provider does. That meant that the port and verify SSL parameters were missing. And so we just had to handle that. And then going forward, we're going to look at adding the same endpoint support to hosts that we have for the XC management system model. And that is it for providers. Over to Jim.
Okay, for platform enhancements, Nassar continued on the enhancements to the non-Rails worker by updating the containerized worker's status to started. Keenan forced our Rails version to 6.171. The bot updated the English translations, which gave us an opportunity to detect and fix some incorrect messages that we had in code. Next, Adam added a schema migration to remove the SCVMM provider. And I added some caching around the MIQ expression to Ruby method to improve the event timeline performance. I also added some enhancements around audit logging. You can see the links for details. Next slide, please. For platform bugs, Jason fixed the terribly performing regular expression in MIQ expression field parse. On to Keenan with the API.
Hey, good morning. So Joe added some logging support for our API request. So he got in the request ID and the session ID to allow users to more easily track their requests. On to Jason for the rest.
All right, and that's the end of our Sprint 205 review. The next Sprint 206 review will be on February 22nd at the usual place and time. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone in the community, thank all our presenters today, thank all the contributors to ManageIQ, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.